Lisa Hamilton thought she had the perfect life. She was married to Mark, a successful businessman, and they lived in a beautiful home in a quiet neighborhood. For years, everything seemed normal. But beneath the surface, something dark was brewing, something that would soon shatter Lisa's world. It all started when Lisa noticed small changes in her husband's behavior. He was distant, distracted, and spending more time away from home. But what truly shocked her was when she discovered the real reason Mark wasn't just pulling away from her. He was planning to leave, not just her, but with her younger sister, Emily. What followed was a series of lies, secrets, and betrayal that pushed Lisa to the edge. Her husband's deceit, and the fact that it involved her own sister, was a blow too devastating to bear. The anger and heartbreak that followed would lead Lisa down a path from which there was no return. In this story, we will uncover the chilling events that led to a tragic and deadly confrontation between a wife, her husband, and the sister who came between them. Stay tuned as we explore the dark side of love, betrayal, and the lengths one person will go to when their trust is shattered. Lisa Hamilton had always considered herself lucky. She and her husband Mark had built a life together over the past decade that seemed to be the very picture of stability. They owned a charming, spacious house in a suburban neighborhood, the kind where everyone knew each other's names. Their careers were steady, with Mark working as a project manager for a tech company and Lisa running her own small interior design business. To the outside world, they were the perfect couple, a duo that had everything figured out. But cracks had begun to form in their seemingly perfect life, and Lisa was starting to feel the weight of them. It had all started gradually. Mark began coming home later and later, offering vague explanations about late meetings, client dinners, and work projects that needed immediate attention. At first, Lisa didn't think much of it. They had been married long enough that she trusted him implicitly. Everyone goes through stressful periods at work, she reasoned, and it wasn't unusual for someone in his position to have to stay late or meet clients after hours. She chalked it up to a busy schedule and figured things would return to normal eventually. But the small changes in Mark's behavior started to become bigger issues. He grew more distant, both physically and emotionally. He would come home, say he was tired, and retreat to his home office without much more than a quick kiss on the cheek. Their conversations grew shorter, less meaningful. The intimate connection they had shared, the one that had made their relationship strong, began to fade. He no longer seemed interested in the little details of her day, and she stopped trying to ask about his. Their weekends, once filled with shared activities like hiking or going out to dinner, were now spent apart, Mark with his work or an occasional golf outing with friends, and Lisa alone in the house, wondering what had changed. Lisa wasn't one to jump to conclusions. She tried to be understanding, offering to talk if something was bothering him. She asked several times if he was feeling stressed or overwhelmed, even suggesting that they take a vacation to reconnect. But every time she reached out, Mark would give her the same dismissive response: "It's just work." Nothing to worry about. His reassurances, once comforting, began to feel hollow. Lisa wanted to believe him, she truly did, but deep down, an unsettling feeling had begun to take root. Something was wrong, and it wasn't just work. As the weeks passed, the tension between them grew. Mark's absences became more frequent, and his excuses more implausible. Lisa couldn't help but feel that something else was going on. The turning point came one Saturday afternoon when Lisa was cleaning the house. Mark had left early that morning for what he called a work conference out of town. Lisa was tidying up his home office when she saw his phone on the desk. Mark had left it behind, which was unusual for him. He never went anywhere without it. For a moment, Lisa hesitated. She didn't want to be the kind of wife who snooped through her husband's phone, but her curiosity and the growing unease she had been feeling for weeks got the better of her. She picked it up, intending only to glance at his messages, maybe reassure herself that it really was just work. But what she found shattered her world. Mark's phone was full of messages, but they weren't from a colleague or a business partner. They were from her younger sister, Emily. Lisa's breath caught in her throat as she scrolled through the texts. At first they seemed innocent enough, catching up, discussing family matters, but as she read further, the tone changed. The messages became more intimate, more personal, and then she saw them: words of affection, plans to meet in secret, promises of a future together. It was undeniable Mark and Emily were having an affair. Lisa's hands shook as she read the texts. How could they do this to her? Her own sister, the person she had grown up with, trusted and loved more than anyone, had been sneaking around with her husband behind her back. And Mark, the man she had built her life with, was planning to run away with Emily and leave her behind. It wasn't just a casual fling. They were making plans, discussing where they would go, how they would start fresh together, and how they could keep it hidden for just a little longer. Lisa felt her heart shatter into a million pieces. The betrayal cut so deep she could hardly breathe. She had always trusted Mark implicitly and loved her sister unconditionally. Now, she realized that the two people closest to her had been lying to her for who knows how long. The life she thought she knew had been built on lies and deceit, and the future she had imagined was crumbling before her eyes. In the days that followed, Lisa tried to keep herself together, but the weight of the betrayal was too much. She couldn't confront Mark right away. She needed time to process what she had discovered. Every time she saw him, her stomach twisted in knots, and she felt an overwhelming urge to scream at him, to demand answers, but she didn't. She kept her composure, watching him carefully, piecing together more clues. She saw the way he glanced at his phone when he thought she wasn't looking, the way he smiled at texts he received during dinner, the way he left the house at odd times, claiming he had to go to work. The puzzle pieces fell into place, and soon the picture was clear. Mark and Emily weren't just having an affair. They were planning to run away together. They had been waiting for the right moment, carefully planning their escape, all while pretending that everything was normal. Lisa realized that they were going to leave her behind, abandon her, their marriage, and the life they had built together. The realization was too much to bear. But instead of breaking down, Lisa's grief and hurt began to transform into something else, something darker. The anger that had been simmering inside her boiled over, and she found herself consumed with thoughts of revenge. They couldn't just walk away from her life and leave her in ruins. She wouldn't let them. If they were going to destroy her world, then she was going to make sure they didn't get away with it. The days that followed Lisa's discovery were a blur of anger and sorrow. She felt trapped in a nightmare that she couldn't escape. Every interaction with Mark, every innocent smile or casual conversation, felt like another knife twisting in her back. Her mind raced constantly, replaying every interaction she'd had with her sister over the past year, searching for signs that she had missed glances, comments, moments when she should have known something was wrong. How could she have been so blind? As the shock of the discovery wore off, Lisa's thoughts became consumed by one thing: she needed to act. She couldn't let Mark and Emily get away with this betrayal. She had spent too many years building her life with Mark, and now they were plotting to take it all away. She wasn't going to sit by and let them walk away together. The rage inside her was growing, and she realized that she was capable of doing things she had never thought possible. Lisa's first instinct was to confront Mark, to scream at him, to throw the evidence of his affair in his face. But as the days passed, she realized that confronting him wouldn't be enough. It wouldn't stop them. She needed a plan, something that would make sure neither Mark nor Emily ever had the chance to start a new life together. Her mind began to spiral, and soon she started imagining how she could make Mark pay for what he had done. She watched him closely over the next few days, noting his patterns and routines. Mark had grown so comfortable with his lies that he no longer bothered to cover his tracks as carefully as he once had. He would leave the house under the guise of work, but Lisa knew exactly where he was going to meet Emily. He always had an excuse: a late meeting, a client dinner, a work trip out of town. Lisa let him think she was none the wiser, but inside, her resolve grew stronger with every lie he told. Then there was Emily. Lisa hadn't spoken to her sister since the day she found the texts. Emily had always been the more carefree of the two, more spontaneous and less bound by the expectations of family. But Lisa had always loved her sister despite their differences. Now, though, Emily was nothing but a source of pain and anger. Lisa couldn't understand how Emily could betray her in such a cruel way. The anger Lisa felt toward her sister was just as intense as the fury she harbored toward Mark, and she realized that both of them needed to be held accountable for what they had done. One evening, after Mark had left the house yet again for another work meeting, Lisa made her way to Emily's apartment. She knew that she needed to confront her sister first. The drive was tense, her hands gripping the steering wheel tightly as she replayed the words she had read on Mark's phone. By the time she arrived at Emily's doorstep, her heart was pounding with anger and anticipation. Emily answered the door, surprised to see Lisa standing there. For a moment, the sisters simply stared at each other, the tension palpable in the air. Emily knew something was wrong the moment she saw Lisa's face, but before she could speak, Lisa pushed her way inside. The confrontation was inevitable. The conversation that followed was heated and emotional. Lisa demanded answers, throwing the texts in Emily's face, asking her how she could betray her own sister like this. Emily, taken aback, didn't deny the affair. Instead, she tried to justify it, telling Lisa that she and Mark had fallen in love, that it wasn't planned, and that they never meant to hurt her. But her explanations only fueled Lisa's fury. Emily didn't seem to grasp the magnitude of what she had done. She spoke about love as if it excused her actions, as if that somehow made everything okay. There was no apology, no remorse. Emily didn't ask for forgiveness or try to make amends. Instead, she spoke about the future, about how she and Mark wanted to be together, how they planned to leave soon and start fresh somewhere new. The words felt like a slap to Lisa's face. In that moment, something inside Lisa broke. She left Emily's apartment, her mind racing with thoughts of revenge. The idea of Mark and Emily running away together was unbearable. They couldn't just walk away from her life and leave her to pick up the pieces. Lisa knew that if she didn't stop them, they would destroy everything she had worked for, everything she had built with Mark. The idea of them starting a new life together while she was left behind was too much to bear. That night, Lisa made a decision that would change everything. If Mark was planning to leave her for Emily, then she was going to stop him permanently. The rage inside her had solidified into a deadly determination. She couldn't let them escape, and she couldn't let them destroy her life. She would end it on her terms. Over the next few days, Lisa carefully planned what she would do next. She knew she had to be smart about it. She couldn't let anyone suspect her of foul play. She watched Mark closely, paying attention to his routines, waiting for the right moment to strike. She planned every detail meticulously, making sure nothing would go wrong. And then, when the moment came, she would make her move. Mark wouldn't see it coming. He would never expect that the woman he had been lying to for months, the wife he had betrayed, would be the one to bring his carefully laid plans crashing down. Lisa felt a sense of satisfaction as her plan took shape. She would make sure that Mark and Emily never had the chance to start their new life together. Their betrayal would end here one way or another. Lisa's mind was made up, and there was no turning back. The betrayal had pushed her too far, and now the only way to end the pain was to end Mark's life. The day of the murder was marked by a tense calm in Lisa's household. She had awoken early, just as she had every other day, but today was different. Today she was preparing herself for what she knew would be the final act in her twisted marriage. Mark had left the house that morning without a second thought, offering a quick peck on the cheek and a promise to be home late again, another meeting keeping him out for hours. Lisa had nodded, hiding her seething anger behind a smile she had perfected over the past few weeks. As Mark went about his day, likely sneaking off to meet Emily under the guise of work, Lisa began to meticulously set her plan in motion. She spent the day making everything appear as normal as possible. She attended to some housework, went grocery shopping, and even met a friend for lunch to create the perfect alibi in case anyone asked. To anyone who saw her that day, she was a woman going about her ordinary life. But inside, Lisa's emotions were in turmoil. Every mundane task she performed was overshadowed by the thought of what she would do that night. By the evening, Lisa was a bundle of nerves. She poured herself a glass of wine and sat in the living room, her mind racing. She replayed every lie, every betrayal, and every secret Mark had hidden from her. The rage that had been simmering for weeks bubbled up to the surface, but she kept herself composed. She had to stay calm if she was going to see this through. Mark finally arrived home well after dark. He opened the front door and stepped inside, oblivious to the storm brewing just a few feet away. Lisa was sitting in the dimly lit living room, the glow of a lamp casting long shadows across her face. She appeared calm, even serene, but Mark could sense something was off. He noticed the glass of wine in her hand and how eerily quiet the house was. There was no television, no music, just silence. Mark greeted her casually, but his words hung in the air, unanswered. Lisa didn't respond at first. She let the tension build, watching as Mark grew uncomfortable under her cold gaze. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Lisa spoke. She began to calmly recount everything she had discovered, the texts between him and Emily, the secret meetings, and the plan to run away together. With each word, Mark's face paled. At first, he tried to deny it. He laughed nervously, claiming she must be mistaken, that she had misunderstood. But Lisa's knowledge of the affair was too detailed, too precise for him to deny. Realizing he had been caught, Mark's tone shifted from defense to anger. He lashed out at her, blaming her for the state of their marriage. He accused her of being cold, distant, and inattentive, suggesting that it was her fault he had sought comfort elsewhere. His words were venomous, meant to hurt her, but Lisa didn't flinch. She had expected this. As Mark continued his tirade, something inside Lisa snapped. Her fury, carefully controlled for so long, erupted. She stood up from the couch and marched into the kitchen, ignoring Mark's insults as they spewed from his mouth. He followed her, still ranting, not realizing the danger he was in. Lisa reached for the knife block on the counter, her hand shaking as she grabbed the largest knife. In that moment, her vision blurred with rage. Everything she had felt, betrayal, anger, humiliation, came crashing down on her at once. Mark had barely finished his sentence when Lisa turned, the knife gripped tightly in her hand. Without hesitation, she plunged it into his chest. The action was swift, almost instinctual, as though her body had been waiting for this moment. Mark gasped, his eyes wide with shock and disbelief as he stumbled backward, clutching his chest. He tried to speak, but no words came. Blood poured from the wound, soaking his shirt as he collapsed onto the floor. For a moment, the world seemed to stop. Lisa stood over him, the knife still in her hand, her breathing ragged and heavy. The reality of what she had just done settled over her like a dark cloud. She stared at Mark's body, watching the life drain from him, but felt no remorse. Instead, there was a strange sense of satisfaction. She had finally taken control. Mark would never leave her for Emily now. He would never betray her again. The house was eerily silent, save for the ticking of the kitchen clock. Lisa's thoughts raced as she processed what had just happened. She had killed him. Mark was dead, and there was no undoing it. Panic began to set in as she realized the gravity of her actions. What had she done? How was she going to cover this up? Lisa forced herself to think rationally. She couldn't afford to lose her composure now. If she was going to get away with this, she needed to act quickly and carefully. She wiped her fingerprints off the knife and tossed it into the trash, already formulating a plan to dispose of it later. She went about the house, cleaning up any trace of the crime. She wiped down surfaces, scrubbed the floor where Mark's blood had pooled, and made sure there was no evidence linking her to the murder. When she was satisfied, she took a deep breath and looked at Mark's lifeless body one last time. It was over. Lisa knew she had to create an alibi. She couldn't simply report Mark missing without arousing suspicion. The next morning, she called the police, her voice calm and steady as she told them that Mark hadn't come home the night before. She played the role of the concerned wife perfectly, saying that he had been working late but never returned. The officers assured her that they would look into it, and for a brief moment, Lisa believed she had done it. She had covered her tracks, and no one would suspect her. Lisa thought she had executed the perfect crime. For the first few days after she reported Mark missing, everything seemed to be going according to plan. The police conducted initial interviews, asking Lisa about Mark's behavior in the days leading up to his disappearance. She played the part of the concerned wife flawlessly, telling them that Mark had been working late frequently, but nothing seemed out of the ordinary. She cried on cue, expressing her worry for his safety, convincing the officers that she was just a devastated wife, trying to understand what had happened to her husband. But beneath her calm exterior, Lisa was a wreck. Every time the phone rang or the doorbell chimed, her heart raced, fearing it was the police coming to arrest her. She barely slept, haunted by the image of Mark's lifeless body on the floor. She knew she had to act normal, but the weight of her guilt was beginning to crush her. Still, she held it together, determined to see her plan through. As the investigation progressed, the police initially had little to go on. Mark had seemingly vanished without a trace, and there were no immediate signs of foul play. But as they delved deeper into his life, they uncovered a detail that would shift the focus of the investigation: Mark's affair with Emily. It didn't take long for the detectives to connect the dots. They interviewed friends and colleagues who confirmed that Mark and Emily had been spending a suspicious amount of time together. Some even mentioned that Mark had spoken about leaving Lisa, though no one knew the full extent of his plans. With this new information, the police began to view Mark's disappearance in a different light. Could his affair have played a role in his vanishing? Had something happened between Mark, Emily, and Lisa that led to foul play? The detectives started digging deeper into Lisa and Mark's marriage, interviewing neighbors and friends who revealed that the couple's relationship had been strained in recent months. The image of the perfect marriage began to unravel. Lisa, sensing the investigation was turning toward her, grew increasingly paranoid. She knew the police were getting closer, and despite her best efforts to cover her tracks, small details began to slip through the cracks. Detectives noticed inconsistencies in her story, little things she hadn't anticipated. For instance, she claimed that Mark had left for work the morning before he disappeared, but neighbors reported seeing his car still parked in the driveway that evening. A few colleagues mentioned that Mark had never shown up to the meeting Lisa said he was attending. Slowly but surely, her carefully constructed alibi began to fall apart. The final nail in the coffin came when the police conducted a more thorough search of the house. Lisa had tried her best to clean up the scene, but in her panic, she had overlooked a crucial detail: bloodstains. The detectives found traces of blood in the kitchen that had seeped into the cracks of the tile grout, evidence that Lisa had missed during her frantic cleanup. Forensic analysis confirmed that the blood belonged to Mark. With the discovery of the bloodstains, the police officially shifted their focus to Lisa as the prime suspect. Detectives pressed her harder in their questioning, and under the weight of their suspicions, Lisa began to crack. Her once calm demeanor faltered as she struggled to keep up the lie. She stammered through her answers, contradicting herself in small but significant ways. The pressure was mounting, and Lisa knew it was only a matter of time before the truth came out. The investigation reached a turning point when the police obtained a search warrant for Lisa's car and phone records. They discovered that in the days leading up to Mark's disappearance, Lisa had been in contact with several people, including her sister Emily. The messages between the two revealed tension, with Emily expressing concern over how Lisa had been acting lately. Detectives theorized that Emily might know more than she was letting on and called her in for questioning. As the investigation closed in on Lisa, she realized she couldn't keep up the lie any longer. With the evidence mounting against her, Lisa confessed to the murder. She told the police everything: how she had discovered the affair, how Mark and Emily had planned to run away, and how, in a moment of rage, she had killed him to stop it from happening. The trial that followed was a media sensation. The story of a wife driven to murder after discovering her husband's affair with her own sister captured the public's attention. In court, Lisa's defense team argued that she had acted out of emotional distress, pushed to the edge by the betrayal of the two people closest to her. But the prosecution painted a different picture, one of a cold, calculated crime committed out of jealousy and revenge. In the end, Lisa was found guilty of murder and sentenced to prison. Emily, who had been devastated by Mark's death, was left to grapple with her own guilt, knowing that her relationship with Mark had ultimately led to his demise. The family was shattered, and the tragic events left a lasting scar on everyone involved. The story of Lisa Hamilton serves as a grim reminder of how love, betrayal, and jealousy can lead to the most devastating consequences. What began as an affair in secret ended in bloodshed, leaving a family torn apart and a life lost forever.